I was like, okay, is this what I want to keep doing? And the answer was absolutely. Like, I want to keep doing this. Like, I don't feel like we've solved the problem. Like, IDA is still the major dominant tool. Technically there's still problems that I want to solve. I think where the product itself is at a spot where it can now replace IDA for the vast majority of users. And so now we just got to go like show everybody, like convince them and like demonstrate it and be like, hey, listen, you get all these advantages. Let's get everybody switched. And so that's super exciting. Like, I feel like we've done some of the hardest work, and now we can reap the rewards.
This is Hackers to Founders, a podcast about cybersecurity professionals who have reached the pinnacle of their cybersecurity expertise and have ventured into new frontiers, whether it's launching innovative startups or making impactful investments in our industry. My name is Chris Magistrado, and I'm a vulnerability researcher best known for traveling and meeting hackers from all around the world. And I'm using what little extrovert skills I have to introduce to you hackers that are changing the world. Today we are joined by Jordan Wiens, a co-founder of Vector35, a longtime DEF CON CTF participant and winner of multiple years, who will share with us a unique story of Binary Ninja, its creation, and where it's going to go into the future. This is Hackers to Founders. All right, welcome everybody to the show. My name is Chris Magistrado, and I'm joined here with Jordan Wiens. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You got it.
Is it German or what's your?
Yeah, I think it's originally like Wiens, but like we've always pronounced it Wines in my family and spelled it that way. My grandfather's brothers were born in Germany, but
okay, that's so funny. Like mine's Magistrado, but I think it's like technically Magistrado, but like we're Filipino
anglicized. Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Excellent. Yeah, we were just talking about different processes in terms of like starting a business.
I'm one of the founders of Vector35. It'll be 10 years this January, which is bonkers to me. But yeah, so there were three of us originally, and like three technical co-founders. Two of us sort of split all the administrative duties, which was also really nice. Having another co-founder that like we could each be part technical and part administrative actually helped a ton. So we've been able to grow, I think, really a lot bigger, like I said, even sort of lacking as much administrative as maybe we could have, a lot because of that, because Peter and I split that role, and that helps a ton. It's also just nice, too, to feel like, we're engineers trying to figure out marketing and pricing and, contracts. And so like
all the books and things and try to, especially 10 years ago, was there even a lot of like cybersecurity companies, startups, or even resources to learn about how to work with governments on that?
No, yeah, it was like so what we did have was we had a sort of like mentor network. So we had Mike Franson from Kudu Dynamics, who we had previously worked with back at Raytheon before that. And in fact, so we got our start as a company working on Cyber Grand Challenge, the DARPA CTF, like robots playing CTF, like automated. Yeah. They, the winning team went to go play in the DEF CON finals. So that was like our first contract, and it basically was a matter of Peter and Rusty and I, the three co-founders, were all working at Raytheon at the time, and CGC basically needed help running like the visualization side. So they had a game company that was contracted to like build visualizations, but they didn't know anything about capture the flag or security, and so to be like, hey, make a dashboard, make a visualization, was like not easy for them, and the people running the game didn't have time to like educate. There we go, that's a much better one. So we basically got brought on to do that. So Rusty and I started on that contract, and like that was the start of our company. So Mike Franson was one of the people working that. I don't think we directly subcontracted to him, but he really helped us a ton. Gave us his rate card and was like, here's how you structure it. And we had, working at Raytheon, we had a lot of some intuition. We were technical, tech leads, so we knew different contracting types and scheduling and proposal process and stuff. But we were not the program managers doing some of the details. So we had, a little bit of a learning curve, but certainly less, I think, than if we had started from scratch. And so it helped that we had that kind of basis, and that's so we started the company with that contract, basically paid the bills with that. And then, like, it's not like a startup where like you grind the startup like 60 hours a week all on your product, or you take on VC money, whatever. We did like 40 on our contract, and then Rusty dropped down to like 3/4 time. And so he was working on Binary Ninja on like the other 3/4 as well as extra time. And so, we were both like working extra hours, but, the bulk went to the contract to pay the bills. So we took a salary, we had a nice benefits, and we had a budget, and we had a rate card, and then we could do the.
So the actual product for like Binary Ninja, was this already in place where like you guys were developing it and saying like we already have.
Yeah,
it's part of the contract or it's part of a buyer already.
It wasn't part of the contract, but it was a part of our design for the company. So we, in fact, like that was one of the pitches. Like when Mike first reached out to us, he's like, "Hey, do you want to go build that Binary Ninja thing? You've been thinking about it,
talking about." So you guys were
talking about it.
I really want to build this thing anyway.
Well, because it existed. Yeah, it actually. In fact, there's even an open. The original version is still out there in open source. There's a GPL Python version. In fact, we had somebody accuse us of like ripping off a Python. Like, how dare you rip off this existing project? And we're like, one, we wrote it, and two, we don't have to. We can relicense it however we want. And three, it's rewritten completely. The new one's all C++. So we had we had written Binary Ninja for CTF. I don't know if Rusty first started it maybe 13 years ago, 12 years ago. Like it was built internally just to help our CTF team. And then it had so some of like the design that kind of carried through, the name carried through. But that's about it. Like the actual code was, like I said, completely rewritten. It was all Python before, and it was completely rewritten in C++ and still has like the Python plugin API now, but all the analysis is C++. So rewriting it basically was our first order of business, and we basically started that like even just like right as we started the company. We're, like I said, doing that on the side, and then it was about a year after we started the company before we launched the first version of it, which I'm almost embarrassed now when I look back at like the features it had. Like people paid us money for that. Like we did charge a lot less, but it's crazy how far it's come.
Nice, beautiful, and like. So you guys were developing the company and the product while you guys were still at Raytheon?
No. So so the Python version, right? Like the open source Python version was built at Raytheon, and then basically we quit there, started Vector35 January something, whatever I guess. So it's, by the way, it's Vector35 because we were all 35 years old in 2015. So it makes it easy to keep track of the. Yeah, so 2025 would be a decade. But Peter, Rusty, and I were all born in 1980. So we that's how we started it, and then we basically rewrote it then ourselves, like a sort of clean code base for the ground up after we started the new thing.
So like I know like certain companies, it's like if you do like Apple specifically, like if you design anything while you're working at Apple, and then even like sometimes it's like 5 years after we still own that.
They own all that stuff. Yeah, so Rusty didn't have that agreement because he started so early. His stuff wasn't locked up. And they had gotten some people. In fact, I didn't have one either. I was one of the last people that was hired before they started doing that for employees. So we never had those agreements, and so we were pretty flexible with the Ep.1. They also had you could also declare a thing and be like, I built this on my own. It's independent. You don't own it. You could submit the paperwork even while you were there for them, which he may have even done, even though he didn't need to. I don't think. I don't remember the specifics of it, but yeah, there was a way. But yeah, Apple is notorious for you don't touch open source while you work for Apple. You don't do any of their side stuff. You are completely locked down.
Yeah, it's completely wild. I have friends that are leaving there from the security aspect, and they're like, yeah, I gotta wait. And this is before I can even make my product and things like that. And they'll be doing red teaming at Apple, and it's like, yeah, I got something good, but I gotta wait the 5 years before I can even create it, which I don't know, stifles innovation, creativity, but.
Yeah, I love Apple products. I'm a huge Apple fan as a consumer, but I don't know that. And I've heard a lot of good. There's some good things about the structure and with the impact you can have when you go work there. And there's a lot of great people, a lot of good friends that work there. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the way that they approach stuff like that. Their secrecy, the lockdown kind of requirements. I do know one person right now. I'm not gonna name who's trying to because there is supposedly a way you can contribute to open source while you work at Apple, and you can get approval and go through a process and get a bunch of things. He's working it, so we'll see. I wish him Godspeed, but
yeah, I'm happy we started this conversation. We kind of just jumping into it.
Yeah, straight in.
We're talking about entrepreneurship. You're talking about your company, Vector35. And then even a little bit of government contracting, but the audience, maybe they don't know too much about yourself and how you entered into our industry, and then even what you did and where you started at DEF CON as well. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about your background, because there's a lot here and it's super interesting.
Thank you. So I was always into computers. I went to college thinking now I'll get a real degree and do something else. I don't know why in my head this was a thing.
Were you playing with computers at your house before college?
I just grew up. My dad had a computer. I was like very straight laced. Like I never smoked, drank. Like I was just very like straight edge kind of like as a kid. And so like I never did anything illegal like hacking wise, but I was always super into it. And I was really into computers. I was like running Linux at home, and like I started kind of like teaching myself programming from like 321 Contact magazines in the back. So I was kind of into
what languages was that? You're doing, like,
basic, just like old GW basic was the beginning. Yeah, I wish it's funny because Rusty, my other co-founder, was highly technical. He wrote his first emulator at the age of like 14, and it was bought by TI. Like Texas Instruments bought his emulator because it was better than their official one, like licensed his tech. So he was like, because he was doing the same things.
How did he even have a conversation with TI about that? Like,
they reached out to him, as I understand it. Like, yeah, it's kind of crazy. In fact, you can actually find. Like, I was writing stuff for the TI, like all the old Usenet forums, like TICalc.org and the old forums and stuff. But I was writing TI basic programs, and he was in here like hand coding assembly, writing emulators for the hardware, like pre-internet.
You also were selling to TI at a teenage age as well?
No, I was just in the same like the TI Calc programming scene, like writing little apps, because you would write apps and post them online, like at the beginning of the internet, like early like Go for Even days and Usenet and that kind of stuff. So that was kind of part of what got me like online a little bit. But I wasn't nearly as good of a programmer. So I was good with computers. I was very good with computers, and I had like a lot of like IT jobs. My first job was selling dial-up internet accounts from a mall. I started doing tech support for them.
Or different providers?
It was literally called Internet in a Mall. It was a very brief. They went out of business not long afterwards. It would be a kiosk in the mall. You do it from, and I worked for Gateway Computer tech support for a while, doing like phone support, which was the worst because we were like an outsourced reseller. So they would call up, and we didn't even have the customer database. So we'd have to be like, okay, open up your case and read me serial numbers and look up in a physical book to find the model numbers to get the download URLs to like drivers and stuff. Like it was abysmal. But it was it was a good learning experience. Actually, I met Jason Street of all people, who's active in the security scene. He was like my boss, and we discovered this like 20 years later. We're like, wait a minute, I know you. It took us forever to figure it out because we just like didn't go back far enough.
And for those who don't know Jason, who's Jason?
Yeah, Jason Street is very like famous pen tester. Does a lot of stuff in the security community. Just Google Jayson Street. You can see a ton of talks from him. Really
excellent presentator as well.
Yeah, great storyteller, good presenter. Yeah, so yeah, he was like my boss, like literally in 1996 or something. And then went to college. Thought like, okay, I'll get a job, and then. Didn't think about computers. I was dual math and computer science, but I started working for the university.
You said dual math, so are you doing like applied mathematics or?
It was number theory. I really loved. So I wanted to work for the NSA. I just thought
I that aspiration.
I read a lot of spy novels as a kid. Okay, I read a lot. I read a ton. I love spy books, and so I studied Mandarin in college. I was a math major and a computer science major. I was like, because at the time they hired four things. They hired hardware engineers. I didn't want to deal with that. Language, math, and computer science. And I was like, well, I got 3 of the 4 covered. Ironically, 9/11 happened, and I dropped off a resume at the booth, like they came to a career fair when I was already working for the university. So I started working part-time for the university. It turned into a full-time job. So I dropped off a resume. Never heard back. Who knows what happened with it? And then years later, I was working for them as a contractor, and it cost them a whole lot more money. So that would have saved the government some cash if they would have just gone after that. So I started working like IT jobs at the university, and I had a server set up this like Red Hat Linux 5, not Red Hat Enterprise Linux, like Red Hat 5, the old school. It was like, I still remember that when you set up your sound driver, it would be like, my name is Linus Torvalds, and I pronounce Linux.
Hello, this is Linus Torvalds, and I pronounce Linux as Linux.
Like, it's Linus, but you pronounce it Linux, because there was that big debate, and like that was the sample file that would play. So, yeah, setting up that, and it got popped. Like somebody had like a print server bug I set up the server like overnight, didn't finish the updates or something, came back to work the next day, and it had been unplugged. There was a note from my boss like, hey, the security coordinator for the university says this was sending spam. They had gotten reports that like overnight it was, or over the weekend or whatever it was sending some spam out, and I was like,
to the internet, and like someone on the net got it, or it was
it was internet. Everything was public IP at the time at the university. There was no like firewall. Oh no, this was like
you have one device connected. It's public.
It's public. Yep, go live.
No
Unless you
NAT,
had your
no
own
NAT.
NAT. Unless each department, like the university, the dorms had a NAT, for example, or like certain departments maybe have, but like by default, just like yep, it was all there. So it was the Wild West, and that was like all that would happen. You would just send spam. Like that was the only like malicious thing that would happen basically at the time. It wasn't even like botnet era. So this is like 2000, maybe 2001. And so I was like, whoa, I got hacked. This is so cool. And so like I did some kind of basic forensics and like wrote up a little report for my boss. He forwarded it on to Kathy Bergsma, who was the newly hired like university security coordinator. And she was trying to hire like a security engineer. And she's like, oh, are you interested in this position? And then she was like, oh, you're a student still. Like, I don't want a student. I'm like, no, please. The security stuff's amazing. I want to do this. I've always wanted it. I just never had an excuse to do it. And so anyway, I talked her into it. And that was my first security job, was doing like forensics, instant response, network. I got to do like the firewall and set up like I had a 10 gig IDS system we had built back in the day. I mean, like we had serious pipes. Yeah. So as a research university, we were on Internet 2, whatever it was called, a bunch of different names for it. Like we had really high speed connections. So trying to like buy a IDS that could even go that fast, we actually built our own. We ended up using a bunch of different stuff. We used Row at some points and Sort and a bunch of different things. But like these NDACE, I think with the accelerated video cards, you can actually put rules on the NIC itself and do it like an FPGA basically. So you could do line rate detection and filtering and alerting. And so yeah, it was a super fun gig. I got to do kind of a lot of stuff.
What was the first task or job that they assigned you to as soon as you got the role? Do you remember?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the first thing I did was I automated, what was the vulnerability scanner? ISS from like IBM, or one of the early app scanners. It wasn't Nessus. At one point we switched out to Nessus, but I basically like did some basic kind of like scripting and automation. I wasn't much of a programmer, but I was really good at like scripting and shell scripts and like kind of cobbling things together. And so I automated like this always on scanner for a couple of things that were like really common at the time that were causing us trouble. And so it would just automatically sweep all of our IP space constantly and then either send emails or, take some kind of automated action. And then like we eventually, several of us built like this sort of like automated response system. Like I sort of predated SIM or SEM or whatever, but it was kind of a little bit of that where it would pull from the campus captive portal logs and pull from like the dial-up IP logs and pull from the map of which network administrators have which IP space and like have this database and then combine that with abuse complaints or alerts from our system or the MCA complaints or whatever, like all this different stuff, and it would just automatically have a bunch of rules and send emails for us, like our little ticketing system internally. So yeah, just trying to automate as much as possible, and then getting to build out like the IDS and actually go and physically like deploy like all the different pops all over campus. These IDS boxes. We had Dragon IDS way back in the day, Ron Gula, and it was a good IDS. I enjoyed working that. But yeah, so that was my network defense, my first security job.
Yeah, we're building a lot of tools internally at the college and setting it all up, and like
yeah,
I have I have like two questions. One, like how difficult was it to keep those like pipes open in terms of like the data flowing? And then two, when you left, was it easy to hand over all of the things that you had built? Because this is like a whole, program.
Yeah, thankfully there were enough. By the time I left, there were about 4 or 5 people on the team. And so we had grown the team, and so I wasn't like the only person running stuff for quite a while. And so there were definitely enough. I didn't feel like I was leaving them in a lurch. There were a lot of other people. And that system was still running up until a couple years ago. I don't even know if it is right now, but I went back and visited campus and talked to one of the guys that was still there, who has stayed around.
Good, right?
It's both terrifying and it feels good. Yeah. a little bit of both. Yeah, exactly. Like it was. This thing was written in. There was Perl in there. There was some shell scripts. It was a whole. But like if it ain't broke. And the concept, I think, to this day remains really solid. Like to really just get all of your logs. Even, a great example is I remember at one point we got early flow data and like just gather everything. You never know what's going to be useful. Like the week that we
have storage for it all.
So we had decent storage, and we would only keep like a week of it or a couple days of it or whatever, right? Like we didn't need, because even a week worth of full flow data for all of campus was fantastic, and it was it wasn't like all the internal routers either necessarily. It was that like some of the main, there was a couple of main pops like on campus that we would get the CFLD from or whatever. And so when we started aggregating all that, like we actually had a law student who left a laptop plugged into a like a podium in a classroom overnight, sent spam for a local club to a bunch of emails he had harvested from the campus directory, and then came back in the next day, pulled it, and like took off with it. And he had remote controlled it over he did something where basically we were able to like correlate the only what had happened because he had remote desktoped into it from his like campus portal account from somewhere else on campus, right? So he had like used elsewhere on campus and he had like RDP'd, VNC'd or whatever it was into the box, and we saw that flow, and then we could look up his login from the original machine. So it was only because we had like otherwise it would have been this ephemeral IP that shows up, sends spam, is offline. Like where in the world did that come from, right?
So the investigations are happening within that week span of like when you have
like I mean we got like a bunch of spam complaints like immediately, and we had headers and we pulled the logs and we know exactly where the machine is. We can tell it's like this ephemeral thing. The MAC address hasn't been seen on a wired port before on campus, and it's gone again. But then I was like, oh, we got this new like flow data. Let's go look at it, and we can see sure enough all the app on SMTP and then an inbound RDP, and it's like, oh, hello there. I was still disappointed that they apparently like the guy was like not really punished there. I'm like, that's a lawyer. They really should have the rule book thrown at him. Like they know better. Like, and it was clear that he knew what he was doing was not okay, right? Because he went to great lengths to obfuscate what he was doing, right? Like he didn't just do this from a machine he was logged into. He intentionally wired into a different network, controlled it remotely, and did it that way. So yeah, I was a little disappointed that they didn't. The punishment wasn't particularly severe, which was a little bit disappointing, but that's what it is.
Yeah, interesting. Wow. Yeah. My experience of before working. So I was at Georgia Tech at the Institute of Information Security and Privacy, working like 150 servers for the PhD students that were either malware research or vulnerability research. And
now wait, was that Georgia Tech Lab the same one that just recently got in a little bit of like the news for NIST 800-171 stuff with the?
I don't know, but I'm gonna reach out to my
Google Georgia Tech and NIST 800-171. It's for what it's worth. I'm on the university side. It's a long story. That's a really separate, interesting topic about sort of like the overclassification / the creation of like this new class of protected data called CUI or CDI, which is really, I think, a problem for small businesses. Like the big contractors love it because it's going to lock out small businesses from doing defense contracting.
Here we go. CUI, Control Unified Unclassified Information. Is this a new standard or requirement?
Yeah, so it's basically a new requirement that there was, I forget what is an executive order that basically was like safeguarding defense material. Like it came from good intentions, right? Like after the OPM breach and stuff like that, where they're like, oh, we need to protect information. The problem is like it's unclassified information, but they still want to like make sure it's taken care of well. And so they asked NIST to write a whole bunch of like rules about like how would you do good common sense practices. And like a lot of it's fine, but the problem is just it's 122 pages of government specification that you don't have to read and conform to and like do an audit or self-assess and attest to. And it's like I understand how to run a good secure network, but like as a small company, I'm not gonna like clap on those ankle irons to like slow down how I do development or how my engineers work. So like yes, two-factor auth and everything, absolutely. Password change policies, well, maybe not yours because like there's a lot of debate as to what's a good password policy, but audit log and review, certain like you have to like lock down. It's just a bunch of stuff that you have to do that makes contracting hard. Anyway, let me back up on my bio for a second too. So like that was network defense at UF. Okay. And then I started playing capture the flags, and that's what like got me into offense.
At university.
I did, yeah. So I went to like a SANS conference, like which I forget what SANS course it was in Orlando, doing like offensive security stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, this stuff's fun. Like, again, I've always wanted to like,
all right, yeah,
always wanted to do it, and this is like
and it's legal.
A legal way, exactly. And so like that was super fun. In fact, one of the people in the class was Atlas, a dear friend of mine to this day, and he like went on to play DEF CON CTF that next year. And I was like, dude, how did you, like, I met you were not that good. Like, no offense, man, but you were not that good. He's like, no, like I did this whole boot camp. I got somebody else to mentor me. I wrote my first exploit. I started like, And so he kind of described this process, and I was like, I'm in.
The boot camp? Do you know which boot camp it was that you went?
It wasn't an official boot camp. It was more like a mentorship program. Like he got somebody else to like just reach out, and he basically offered to do the same to me. He's like, hey, I'll give you like some challenges. You can work through it. Like you can jump. I'm putting together a team, and so we started a team, and then we played. So he played as like a road, and that was the last year that you could play as an individual. You could just show up and play as an individual at DEF CON. Okay. From then on out, the last 20 years. How many
individuals showed up at that time to play? And what year was that? Which DEF CON?
There were still several hundred. I mean, that would have been... Actually, you know what? I have a Google sheet where I track the history of DEF CON CTF.
Really? Is it up
there? I don't know if I've added this last year, but here it is, history of DEF CON CTF. Yeah, I'll drop a link if there's a... Yeah, there's a chat here. Yeah, let's see it. All right, it says whisper backstage, but there you go. You should be able to see that. So, let's see. So that would have been... So let's see. The first time I played DEF CON CTF was at the Alexis Park in 2001. Yeah, so I played kind of a one-off. Yeah, at DEF CON CTF, like I barely just turned 21 even, and it was like pickup. It was a pickup game. You could just walk in and sit down and like go. It was kind of wild and crazy, right?
Was there a lot of people? I guess there's 100 people playing, so.
Yeah, I mean, it was still.
How many people were at DEF CON at that time?
Oh goodness, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it was so the Alexis Park as a hotel was like very different, right? Like it was kind of like apartment style, like hotels, kind of spread out, like more resort style.
Right.
And there was like literally a tent on the roof. Like, can you imagine a Vegas, like a tent on the roof? That was the year like Cult of the Cow released like I think BO2K or something, and they announced that from one of the rooms. That was Dmitry Skarlyarov, the PDF. He reverse engineered that they were like ROT 13, like that was their encryption, and like he was arrested by the FBI. That was that same year.
ROT 13 was the encryption.
Yeah, it was basically ROT. It was a little more than that, but it was basically ROT 13. And then like he announced it, and then the FBI arrested him, and people got a ton of flack. And Adobe's like, no, we're not pressing charges because they don't like. They suddenly realized it was like against the like public perception. But yeah, so it was DEF CON 9, 2001. But then I didn't go for the next couple of years. And then I came, so then Atlas was 2005 when he basically solo, like played as a Ronin. And then it was 2006. That was the last year. 2006 was the year you had to like qualify. The only way you could play was to qualify. It was only teams that, only as teams. And so that was the first year I played. And we won those next 2 years. And I was also on the team that won in 2009.
So the first year you played, you just like, you didn't win, but you were getting.
No, we did win. Yeah, we actually. Yeah,
okay.
I got lucky. Well, so I got with smart people, right? So again, we had Atlas, we had Doc Brown, we had Werfer, like a bunch of really good people on the team, and so there was 7 or 8 of us, and yeah, it was like that was like really when it started to like evolve. Like it went from. Like its own sort of own art form, right? Like DEF CON became very kind of like more specialized, and like the game was getting tuned and tweaked, and like people really kind of like honed in on what made DEF CON CTF, and that was really, I think, when it even actually the year before, I would say 2005 is when it really started that process when Ken Shoto took it over. Well, even Ghetto Hackers, maybe 2004 began it, and then but really the game as it existed in 2005, 2006. Hasn't substantively changed. The only real difference was like the CGC introduced brokered, where basically it used to be you just got a server and you were root, you logged in and you defended your server, right? And then there was some other mechanism the organizers had. This is like, yeah, so it's always been attack. So the first 5 years or 6 years of it were like just kind of like show up and plug a machine in. It was like really poorly structured. Like plug a machine in and see what happens. Like that was the CTF. Yeah, hack each other, like run some stuff, I guess. It was a little weird. It was the last year of Ghetto Hackers and the first year of Ken Shoto where they really started to like, no, we're going to give you a VM image pre-configured. You have these services we've custom written. Like that happened really then and started to kind of mature. And then really the only, there's been a lot of changes in like OS or network or, stuff over the years. There's been a couple of new innovations like King of the Hill style challenges, where like you can iteratively like, whoever solves it with the fewest bytes, and then you can continually kind of do it, and so there's like a sort of a separate style challenge. But mostly it's been attack defense. You've got a server, attack it, and defend it at the same time. So you're writing patches for your binaries. You used to be able to put network firewalls in place. That's part of the game that's changed. They've sort of removed that. People got too good. Like people figured out too many generic defenses, right? Like if I can just run my server, I'll just virtualize your entire thing, lift it to something else, and then emulate it or put it in any kind of thing that's doing syscall tracing, and I'll block all access to the key file. Like, ta-da, I've secured your server. There's a bunch of boring, like, we call them Superman defenses. And so the changes lately require you to submit your patch to your binary to the game infrastructure, and then it's deployed for you. You're not root on your box, so you can't totally rewrite. Yeah, and they often will limit the size of the patch and whatnot. So that's the trend the last few years post CGC.
Do you think that's better going forward in this type of fashion?
You know, it's different. It's not better or worse. It's just different. I miss there was all sorts of amazing shenanigans you could pull when you had a full real box and the full shell. And as both an admin and an attacker, there was so many. You'd find things that other teams had forgot, or teams would have wrong permissions, or there's all sorts of really cool stuff you could do, and that's gone away, which is sad. But at the same time, they kind of had to, because like I said, too many teams had figured out these like just generic Superman defenses that you just could never score on them, and that's really boring. Like, yeah, everybody can do one generic wrapper that just doesn't let the key get read and then deploy to all their services, and poof, you can't now score on them like that. That's stupid. So yeah, it's hard to kind of strike that balance. But I do miss the shell shenanigans. That was my main specialty. I was really good at like just weird. Oh yeah, shenanigans. I loved that stuff. Like one year we could log into the scoreboard using a key that they dropped on our box at the beginning of the game, and the key existed in two places. Like it was in a database, it was in a file in the file system, and no team removed it in both places. Like some people would like fix the file permissions to make it not world readable for the file, but they would forget the database. Some people cleared the database but forgot the file. So we had basically everybody's login to their score server, which like I could log in as them and score for them, I guess, or I could log in. It's like what can you do on that? Well, one of the things you could do is reset their overwrite token. All right, so you have an overwrite token that when you exploit somebody to prove you have write access, not just read access, right? You would take your overwrite token and put it on top of the flag file, and the hypervisor or whatever's doing the logging would detect that and be like, oh, okay, you get points for an overwrite, right? So it was just, you could both steal a flag and overwrite, or some services maybe you could only overwrite, right? Depending on the challenge. And so we, for example, click the button to like refresh the overwrite key from School of Root, and we would watch them and wait till they notice, and like 45 minutes later, an hour later, you see them all like looking around, get like, who hit the button? Who hit the button? And then they go back to work, wait till they're not paying attention again, we do it again. So we denied them like overwrite points for a period of time. Like you can't get that back. You've missed that time window. So that was really fun. We also logged in as a different team and gave them points from us, because that was back in the day where you had first blood. So the first person to score a particular service got like an extra bonus points, and then it was just over time, how many time slots could you score in, essentially. And so we intentionally gave low-ranking teams first blood against our services that they hadn't actually done, just to deny those points to other teams, because we knew we couldn't solve those challenges at the time, and we were afraid. Yeah, so there's a bunch of shenanigans. Like that one's actually a little questionable, I think, in hindsight. We did ask the organizers at the time, and they were like, well, you did a hacking thing. You got everyone else's logins. They didn't secure it properly, and you're using that to get an advantage. Like, it's fair. So there, and that one actually didn't matter in the end either, because it turned out that none of the other teams were actually close to solving the ones that we gave those points to. But sort of defensively, we thought it might be. So yeah, I love that side of the game. It was fun. A lot of people have. Yeah, absolutely. I said, I was always kind of straight edge. So like if I ever was I love the shenanigans, but I would always just ask. I'd be like, hey, I want to do a thing. Can I do a thing? And occasionally they'd be like yes, occasionally they'd be like no. Like we've gotten both. And so like there were years that one year when Legit BS was running it their first year, I think actually, like denial of service attacks were kind of a thing. Like they sort of unintentionally opened the door to that. And usually you don't let any DDoS, because one, DDoS is technically uninteresting, right, and dumb. Like yes, you can flood your opponents, nobody cares, right? Like that's not interesting. No points for style. And so there's like a certain amount of things that are just forbidden by rule, and if they catch you, they'll penalize you. And they sort of like one team found a kind of clever-ish way of doing a DOS using the infrastructure, and they allowed it, and we're like, oh, fine. Well, we have this other thing where we can half close a socket and spoof a thing from somebody else and like trigger it, and it will cause them to flood somebody else with traffic. Like, sounds like fair game, right? And they were like, yeah, we did sort of open up the rules for that. We're sorry. And they ended up basically saying, like, no, you can't do that. We're going to give you some points. We're going to give the other team that was doing the other thing a little bit of points, and then just stop doing it, right? So they gave you a little bit of points for that's a cool idea. no one can now do it. You had the first person idea, and so like that was kind of how they did it. I've seen people get kicked out because they cut cords though. One team was so angry they literally went under the table and cut another team's cord. They were just like bad mannered, and they were kicked out of the. They should have been kicked out of the whole convention, but at the time it was just they were kicked out of the CTF. There have been people who explicitly were denial of servicing before, that they were like, stop it, knock it off, and if you don't, we're going to kick you out.
You're hosting now as well, right? So you went from doing that, and so you're hosting. So you're able to see a lot more of what's behind the scenes now. Yeah.
Somewhat. Like I'm so busy with so I'm doing live CTF, which is like sportscasted esports commentary.
I saw you commenting on it. It was like a 4-hour video too. It was like
it's exhausting. Yeah, and thankfully we have a team of people this year. The group's grown a little bit. So like the first year I was literally on camera the entire time. But now we can trade out. Yeah, just like being like
enthusiastic the entire time.
Yeah, high energy, and like you're pretty exhausted by the end. But I mean, it is exciting. It's fun because you're legit watching some of the best hackers in the world. You get to watch their screen live as it happens. So like it is pretty great. But like so I'm like in with the organizer, the main Nautilus Institute team that's running it. I'm not officially on the team. We just kind of like to do our live CTF stuff sort of separately. We just have enough things to worry about. We do technically have access though to what they're doing. We talk a fair amount, so we do hear some stuff. But we're just so busy with our little kind of side quest that I don't worry about that a whole lot. Anyway, I want it to go well, and I'm kind of keep an ear to things. But yeah, so CTF was like my introduction into Offense, right? That was where I was like, okay, cool. Like this is fun. I like writing exploits. I like reverse engineering. I was starting reverse engineering at the university for like malware analysis a little bit, right? Like I had an IDA copy back then, and I wasn't very good, but like I liked the idea.
How did you start learning? Like what resources were you using at the time to start your reverse engineering journey?
I mean, at the time, I don't remember a whole lot. Just like CTF challenges, right? Like, no, literally, I have absolutely highlighted Intel books still sitting on my shelf at the office. For like, it used to be a game to find who could find the most typos. There's a bunch of like little either typos or like errors, depending on which version of the books you had. And
books, they don't ever expect people to actually read them, and like they'll just have like, oh, so this does the thing. Like, don't worry about it, kind of thing. It's like, well, I want to learn. Like,
I think they do. Like they did fix them. You could send them in. I mean, they did do a lot of editions of it, and I don't know if any of the typos that I found are still there in the online versions, because the same docs are now still PDFs online. But yeah, so I just would go through and learn opcodes and look at disassembly, look at decompilers, and I taught an assembly language course when I was working at Raytheon. So the story was I went from network defense at UF, Sharpling captured the flag, and then turned that into a job at a small company called SI Government Solutions, which then Raytheon bought, and they became Raytheon SI, Raytheon CSI, Raytheon Codex, and now they're spun out. Nightwing is like the company's had a million different names.
What's the origin of Nightwing?
Yeah, Nightwing was so SI is a part of Nightwing, but Nightwing was like all of the cyber business that Raytheon had kind of spun off. So it was a bigger business unit, but like a big chunk of it is what was originally SI Government Solutions.
And the SI Government Solutions, that was reverse engineering.
It was all vulnerability research, reverse engineering. There was a fair amount of tool dev and stuff as well. The thing I loved about SI was that like back in the day, so even like several of the, I'm not going to call it explicitly, people I was playing CTF against or with at the time were working for other defense contractors and doing the same kind of work, right? Like there were folks involved. And so even some of the CTF challenges came from like ideas or problems they'd had or stuff, which was really fun to kind of like, find out about that. But the thing that SI did really differently was, and by my third year of winning, the third win I had was with basically a bunch of SI players. So I switched kind of from the original team I was playing with and was playing with them. And the SI had like this focus on tool development, like not just find the bugs or whatever, but like invested a lot of time into both like the analysis harnesses and the fuzzing tool sets and like the fuzzing corpus and fuzzing hardware, like was doing more like infrastructure around it, which was really fun. So we actually had a pretty good sized staff of like just raw developers, just people building tooling. And then it was kind of this internal split, which I think now there was some issues with that in terms of like the that vulnerability researcher hacker cool kids were kind of annoying, and the developers were like the adults in the room, like y'all grow up. And now I'm the developer going, oh, I'm so embarrassed about the way some of us behaved. But it was great because we did have that balance, which I think a lot of companies didn't. And so that was, so they hired me because I was doing tech writing for magazines.
So go into that. I was reading that, and then I think there was a talk that you gave recently in Germany at one of the institutions. I watched that video, and I was like, how did you go from technical writing and saying oh, I want to actually do this, and did you just run to the manager and be like, okay, I'm your guy now?
No, the funny thing is I didn't even know that was the plan. Literally, so what happened was I was playing CTF, I was getting into security, and at the time, SI was like, how do we hire people who can get clearances and write exploits, right? That's a pretty rare. It was people that you could write exploits, but maybe they weren't clearable, or vice versa.
Exactly, and that's where our company, Top Cleared Recruiting, comes in. Finding the right cybersecurity talent with the necessary clearances can be a major hurdle. Did you know that it could take 8 to 15 months on average to hire somebody with a TS SCI plus full polyscope? At Top Cleared Recruiting, we have a network of 1.3 million cleared professionals, ranging from C&O developers, reverse engineers, and data scientists. Whether you're working on offensive operations or data analysis, we connect you with the elite talent you need fast. Visit topclearrecruiting.com and let us help you to find the perfect candidate, already cleared and ready to go. This was in 2005, maybe, or what time frame was this?
Yeah, so this would have been, I think, 2007. Right, because it was my daughter was 1, so that's how I remember it. I started. It was 2007. I met a couple people. I met somebody at RSA. So I at the university. There was a guy in town who was a writer for a bunch of different magazines, and he would kind of partner with the university because we had lots of data, lots of network stuff to test things on, and so he had a long-standing partnership for just network gear to come in and test and work with them. And he started doing when I was doing security stuff. He's like, oh, do you want to write for some of these magazines? I'm like, yeah, that sounds super fun. So anyways, it turned into a sort of side career of writing for InfoWorld and Information Week and a bunch of network computing magazine, a bunch of things that are all out of print now.
Were these big ones at the time?
At the time, they were very well known, and they were CMP was the parent company for a bunch of them. They owned Black Hat at one point. I don't know if that was still the case, but they were literally bought. Black Hat, the conference, was owned by CMP Media. Yeah, this big media publishing house. I have no idea if that's still the case, but I know that at one point that was they actually officially bought it out from Jeff, and so. So it was I went to DEF CON or Black Hat on a press pass for several years because I was a reporter. I went to RSA on a press pass because it was actually writing for magazines. And in fact, I won there was actually an early prototype for Live CTF, a head-to-head competition that the precursor to SI Govs was called SI, and they actually split to do commercial stuff, and SI Govs went to do the government stuff. And so SI, Security Innovation, ran a thing at RSA where it was a web hacking challenge where you were on screen and your screen's above your head and you're competing with somebody else and somebody's with a mic heckling you and talking about what you're doing and you're racing on. So it was very similar. It's really what inspired a lot of the live CTF stuff I've done since. And so I won that, and the headline was literally on Slashdot. It was network computing reporter wins.
Yeah, with your press badge, you're bum. Who's this guy?
People were Jeremiah Grossman at the time was I became good friends with him as a result of he was wait, I interviewed him for the magazine. He's didn't you just do that competition? I was well, I do real work too. So I was doing writing, and so SI Govs basically I went down. I wasn't even in a formal interview. I just went to visit. I had talked to them, or at least I didn't know it was an interview. And at the time they were maybe 30 people. And they looked at my resume and were oh, he knows security stuff. He's writing for magazines. He'd make a great tech writer. Taking our reports on vulnerabilities or things we're doing for government report writing. He could do he'd be a really, really good tech writer. But nobody told me this, and I was yeah, I want to write exploits. This sounds great. So as soon as I started, I was in the engineering group. They just assigned me to start doing reverse engineering, start writing exploits, and I wrote my first QuickTime exploit in the first week, because QuickTime you could just sneeze at and it would fall over back in the day. Started straight into it.
Did you still have to write the technical part where they wanted you to do? You're just oh, I'll do that too, but then you're also no,
literally the person who thought that never talked to the engineering lead that I ended up in. I was just a straight up engineer. I mean, I did do.
What happened to that role that they were looking for originally? Then
they hired somebody else.
I guess we don't really need it.
They did hire somebody else. Yeah. No, it was literally like a while later that they admitted to me. They're like, we didn't originally hire you. That I was like, what? Like, I had no idea that was the intention. But like they. So I mean, I did do some. I did proposal writing and some other kind of writing, but I was not like there were other dedicated tech writers that were hired afterwards.
That's crazy. I'm trying to figure out if there's any like lesson that like if any listeners like how do I get my first really technical job.
Yeah.
Like, is there any lesson that come from that other than just like apply to a technical position, a technical writing position? I don't know.
Yeah,
they ship you over.
Type confusion attack, and you just get them to, you just start doing the other stuff. Like I will say, like, a lot of positions become what you make of it, right? Like no matter what your role is, if you demonstrate the skill in something, I feel like you can shift stuff around. I've seen that happen, more often than not, where somebody, if you're good at it, if you can do it. Just do it, and the company will value it. So
let's dive into that. I feel like some people might actually have questions. Maybe Ford may of course get in the first role, but let's assume like they're in a company and then they're like, okay, now I want to go over to this department. Have you seen some people that have shifted over and like how have they done it?
Yeah, I've seen it work both ways too. I've also seen people who are technical who get burnt out and go to non-technical roles too, right? Like I think both are healthy, right? I've seen people who are like, you know what, in like. For example, like QA, for example, can be like looked down upon, but really good QA is super valuable. And so some people like find their fit not doing the development they were hired for, but in QA or in tech writing or in these other stuff. And then other times, you see somebody who starts as a tech writer and then like very quickly is just writing, hand coding assembly for exploits. I don't know that there's like a manual or a map for it. For me, I just did the things that I found fun. Like if I liked it and enjoyed it, I just did it. Whether I was doing it, so I was at home,
I guess,
playing capture the flag and doing things. And when you're, doing it, when you have the capability, if you communicate with your management, you're like, no, like this is what I want to do. I think a good manager too. Like right now we have one-on-ones occasionally with employees, and like we sort of two different ones. We have like status of like what's your on this project, and then we have a separate one that's at less frequent interval. It's just more just like, hey, what are you doing? Are you happy overall, like with what you're doing? But I think a good boss is like your job is to like find out, does this person want to take on a leadership role? Do they want to take on more technical, less technical? Do they want to like they're not happy with this part of the product they're working on? They want to do less of the Python API, more of the C++ or whatever it is. But I think it goes both ways. I think you as an engineer should be communicating what you want to do. Now, it's not always going to work out, right? Sometimes you got to. I've absolutely had to slog through things I didn't want to do because they need to be done, right? Like that totally happens. But like over a long enough time frame, don't like do something you don't enjoy. Like I've left my jobs when they became not enjoyable or when something else presented itself. It was like 7 to 8 years at the university, 7 to 8 years at Raytheon.
That's a long time at job in general.
Yeah.
Now in this world, like a year and a half, 2 years, people are out.
Yeah, and now it's been 10 years for me at the current one, and the role has changed, the company's growing, things are like, I'm still so excited about Binary Ninja, what we're doing, we're starting this conference, like, so like I have no desire to go anywhere else. It's because I just, it's a cliche, but like love what you do and you'll never work it in your life. Like it's very true. I'm just very, very lucky that I've just always loved what I did, and that could, it paid the bills. Like where it makes sense.
Let's get more into that. So I want to hear about the origin of Vector35 and like what was the deciding factor. It's like let's get into this. Let's start building this out and grow.
Mm-hmm. So for us, we talked earlier, like Binary Ninja was like the CTF tool. Like we were playing Capture the Flag a bunch inside the company, and that was great because I just loved playing Capture the Flag. It was both my hobby, but then the skills directly translated what I was doing for work. We used it for recruiting. Like somebody interview, like, well, we can't really tell you like exact technical examples of what we're doing. Like we had multiple Pony Award winners that weren't like the public version of the ponies. Like they were like, we either beat a Pony Award winner to the research and just it was never public, or so like you can't like show people what you're doing when you're working for a government contractor, unfortunately. But like we could be like, yeah, but we won DEF CON, or we were second place this year, and they were like, oh, like okay, like you have legitimate skills, and like that was like a useful thing to indicate to people. Plus, it was just super fun. It was great team building. It was great. Like we tool dev, like we built technologies for CTF that we were like, actually, this would be really helpful for this like real world problem that we have over here that we'd port or rewrite or adapt. Much in the same way that, again, Binary Ninja was a sort of toy application built for CTF, because it wasn't at the time originally built to be a better decompiler than IDA, but it was meant to be a faster patching tool and quicker analysis and for triage, and you didn't. A lot of people still back in the day didn't trust decompilation anyways. It was more of like, it's good when it's good, but sometimes it's wrong. And
what's the premise on it now? Do people generally say it's fine, or they're like, I want to write my own?
Yeah, I think right now you're relatively foolish if you never use a decompiler. There's reasons where you can't because of an architecture or whatever. But people that started 20 years ago, the decompilation quality wasn't very good. It was amazing that it worked at all. But there were all sorts of times where it would just be straight up wrong. Conditionals inverted, code not shown, code shown, just consistently wrong. And so the error rate was high enough that people would, in fact, actually, I liken a lot of AI stuff to the same sort of thing, where people are like, yeah, AI is wrong all the time. It's now.
It's super early. Yeah, I said the exact same thing. It's we've gone through it 1 year, and it's we're already getting to the point of they're generating videos and images.
They're already providing some value. Yeah.
It's going to be new Wild West with the guys.
And so, we've got Sidekick, which is our AI-based plugin for Binary Ninja. We've been working on, actually, originally, 4 or 5 years ago, we started it internally as research and finally launched it about a year ago.
You guys built the LLM yourself, or you guys used ChatGPT Raptor?
So we started with all of our own models because there was no OpenAI at the time, and we had 6 different sort of techniques or models, and about half of them we sort of threw out when OpenAI came out because it was just so much better. So we're we should not be trying to name variables ourselves or summarize decompiled code. Those two things, we're going to use the better models. But thankfully we had enough internal models that were structure recovery and other things that we were doing that were still better. And so the hybrid approaches worked really well for us. We have kind of a little bit of both. But for people that are sort of AI skeptic in reverse engineering in particular, I like it to the same thing as decompilers. Do you use a decompiler now? And 9 times out of 10, 9.5, 9.9 times out of 10, right? It's yes. People use decompilers because they're just so effective. Maybe you do both side by side, but there's a reason that IDA, Binary Ninja, and Ghidra. Actually, IDA might be the only one that doesn't now. I think about this. Default to decompilation, right? But to me, the default should be decompilation because it's just that good. That should just be the default. Most users want it. You could change it, but
this actually probably brings up a specific thing in my learning of reverse engineering, because I started with Radar and then I went to IDA. I tried to do both. I went to R2Con in 2017, met Pancake, and had a great time. But I would use Radar, and then I also try to use IDA, and I just never use decompilers because it starts defaulting by disassembly. I'm okay, cool. Let me just learn this. So it was just straight assembly.
You can tell when somebody started their career in reverse engineering based on what they default to. I really do think it's a sort of generational thing, and that people now, especially with the availability Ghidra, right? Because Ghidra has just good decompilation out of the box, and Radar's gotten better about the in fact, there's even Cutter's got the Ghidra integration and for decompilation, and it's an option now. But it sort of depends on where you started as to what you prefer. I've seen reason that even when I'm debugging, I have a separate debugger. I don't use Binary Ninja as a debugger, even though it supports it. I know a lot of people who don't use IDA as a debugger, even though it supports it, because they're just used to a debugger and the decompiler as being separate tooling, and maybe you sync your location or whatever, But so there definitely, I think, are sort of generational tells.
Yeah, using VS Code versus Vim.
I use both. Both.
Yeah.
You install the NeoVim layer on VS Code.
Is there a layer on that?
Yeah, you could totally use NeoVim integrated in VS Code and get full Vim bindings. It works quite well. Okay. There's very few things that I miss from a real Vim.
That's great.
I used Spacemax for a while. I used Lunar Vim on the command line. I've tried a bunch of different ones. But the decompilation, I think it makes sense that people are going to use it, and I think AI ultimately people will be using it more and more. But I get why people are hesitant now because it hallucinates sometimes. It's just wrong. And the question is what does the error rate have to be before it's worth your time? And it's just a default thing. You can change it. You can override it, right? So at what point is it where you're going to be oh, nope, I'm just going to leave this on by default, and if it makes a mistake, it's fine. No tool is perfect. No disassembler is perfect. No, even disassembly gets wrong sometimes. So there is an error rate.
There's an error rate, and it's also outside of it being like error or whatever, I think like there will be the talk about like how some of them are political or like how they will have some political bias in some of the things that they say or whatever the case, even though like there's enough factual evidence to suggest one way or the other.
A decompiler?
No. Sorry, I'm talking about AI.
Sorry, I'm really confused. I was really confused. I'm like, I don't think my decompiler's got a political bias. Oh, yeah. No, like AI is for sure. For sure.
I'm talking about like ChatGPT. A lot of the people on one side will say like, oh, this is specifically providing some type of information or like in skewing. I think it was it Bing's or there's like you type in like the president, like George Washington, and he would be black. Like it was just completely wrong.
Yeah. Somebody was trying a little too hard to kind of skew it. Yeah, I as a kid I read a lot of books from authors who I disagree with politically, and I think it's super important that like you're able to like consume
you got some of those book
content.
References?
I don't want to highlight my bias too much. Well, I can give you a mixture of some I agree with and some I didn't. It ran the gamut from very like libertarian stuff from like the Cobra series. Like it's all sci-fi and fantasy and stuff. The Cobra series was really good. From what's his last name? Such a disease, Timothy Zahn maybe. And then Elie Modesitt has very like kind of more left-leaning ecological and economic books that are great. Like I like to read things from perspectives that I don't always agree with because I just think that that's an important skill in society that we've lost. So I don't mind so much. I think it's funny and stupid and silly when the AIs are doing it and they're skewed that badly. But at the same time, like again, if you can't think for yourself, like like grow up. It's okay. You're not going to agree with everybody, whether it's an AI or not. Like figure it out.
Right.
And so, I think you want to use caution and good judgment, and not trust the things. But that applies to everything. It applies to news. It applies to whatever. Which So I don't mind that so much. Like I think it's dumb, and I think it's going to self-correct. It already has, to some degree. I don't think it's quite that crazy anymore, but. No, I like that. I like that people have the option to do that now, and I think that like that sort of balance of like we're going to get a bunch, and I do worry that it's a little bit of a bubble, right? And you're going to get this sort of self-reinforcing. It's an interesting idea if you've heard of is it Heaven
Very
Planet?
Self-reinforcing.
Yeah,
Everything you say about ChatGPT, I want to have this idea. That's a great idea. It never tells you it's a bad idea.
Right.
Like the market's really heavy right now. You might need like a few investors for this. It's like, yes, that's a terrific idea. Go for it. So I don't know. It's never that like maybe you should do some more research on this. Like
and so it's a little bit like the sort of fallacy of like a ruler or a CEO that only has yes men, right? Like that's what you surround yourself. So and that's where I think that people need to be critical. And you need to like embrace not conflict but differences of opinion. Even just like back to my company. My co-founder Peter is much more like growth focused and like future focused, and I'm much more here and now focused and the vibes and the ride kind of thing. And so it's a really healthy tension between the two, because like neither one at the extreme is healthy. Both can be extremely unhealthy when you go too far. And so I think that that's really, really a good thing to look for in a co-founder. You want somebody you really can work with and you trust, and you have ultimately the same vision for the problem you're trying to solve and the difference you're trying to make. But like not necessarily having the same philosophy of how to get there, I think can be really useful and really helpful, as long as you can respectfully disagree and you can figure it out and make a choice and move on together and kind of like decide and go. And it's like I said, it's 10 years in, still going strong. It's
that's
so
amazing. Far. Businesses generally don't last longer than a few years, and like it's amazing. I'd love to hear like a little bit more about where you guys are at right now after 10 years in your journey. What have you guys been doing up to recently, and then we can talk about the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me start at the beginning, because the goal was like our stated goal was like I like Ida, I like Hexerize, I actually get along with the team there fairly well. I nominated Ilfac for his Lifetime Pony Award a few years ago because I just have a ton of respect for what they do. But also like our goal was to dethrone them. Like our goal was like we really want to take it. We think we can do this, and like I've told them this to their face. It's not a surprise, they know. And sort of wish I think the market as a whole will benefit from healthy competition. But like that was our goal.
We love that.
Yeah, that was our goal, right? Like it's out of the gate. I thought they had not had enough competition and just not forced enough innovation out of them. They're seeing, and now with Ghidra and Binary Ninja, you're seeing them make tremendous changes to their pricing, to their product lines, they're really finally reacting. It
used to be like $5,000 for a key for IDA or something, right?
I mean, it hasn't gotten cheaper unless you're a non-commercial student or whatever. Like it actually is, in fact, they're about to, I think, do their subscription pricing, which they've been doing for a while too, which we'll see. I think for some people it'll be cheaper, for some people it'll be more. The total cost will probably go up. I mean, so, they were acquired by PEO last year. Years not long ago, and so there's necessarily going to be a return they're looking to get on that investment, and so I think that's going to make them make certain choices in the market. But yeah, so that was kind of our goal. Like we just feel like this market is like we can disrupt it. We can really come in, like do something new and different, and we made some conscious design changes and differences in how we built Binary Ninja, like with the goal of doing this. And then we had kind of along the way, like, okay, we launched a collaboration version. We actually, both IDA and Binary Ninja announced a collaboration plugin, and then ours came out like a whole year in advance, basically, of theirs. Like we were much sooner to market because we had built that in. From the beginning, we started the company like collaboration is going to be a killer feature. We're going to put that in an enterprise version of Binary Ninja, and it took us 5 years or 6 years, but like we knew it from the beginning. And for people that don't know what the collaboration part is, what is that exactly? Yeah, so it just, I mean, much like, with source code, yours to get where you can work with multiple people and see differences and merge changes and deconflict if there's conflicts. That hasn't existed in the reverse engineering space. Ghidra actually was really the first tool to market that had. There were actually plugins that tried to do it in IDA. They were very brittle. We used them back at Raytheon. Like they would corrupt your database consistently because it was like hacked on. It wasn't really part of the model and didn't work really well. And so Ghidra actually had the first version of this, the open source NSA tool. And both now IDA and Binary Ninja have this where you can, as a team, collaboratively reverse engineer on the same kind of binary. We were marking up different pieces of it. And so that was sort of our first new product beyond just Binary Ninja. And then we launched our Sidekick, the AI thing, a year ago, and that was another new product. And so we're at a really good point now because it took us 10 years. It took us 10 years to really get our decompilation quality, our feature set, our architectures kind of to where it needed to be to really compete with IDA originally and now Ghidra. And so it feels really like the product is finally at the maturity level it needs to be, where we can sort of we're not a superset, right? We have things that they don't have. They still have some things that we don't have. We're working on them. I think it's a small list now at this point, but now we can really start building on top of it in ways that are more interesting and fun, and start solving new problems or problems in a different way. We kind of push beyond it, and so that's really exciting. And like I said, I like that that was always the plan, and we did that. Like we said, we did it with collaboration. We did it with with the AI integration. Our design of our ILs is distinct. Nobody has anything like that. And I think there's a lot of other advantages like the API. So anyway, it feels like we're at a point right now. We're seeing a ton of people switching. We really are at a point now where a lot of folks are and Ghidra makes things tough just as a free price point, but I think having a better UI, faster analysis, the real Python API, bindings for other different languages, better API, program analysis, the ILs in the between, all these other things, people are like, okay, yeah, this is totally worth the $1,500. If you're a professional, $1,500 for a tool that you spend 6 to 8 hours a day in is like come on, it's not even it's underpriced. It really is.
And you guys have a student discount as well for students that want.
Yeah, so we actually have a hobbyist license for $300. So if you're just somebody doing it at home, it's $300. You're still a professional, but it's another field or whatever. And then we have a student discount. You can apply to either one of those other two licenses, and that brings it down to $75 for the non-commercial student license, and then $350 or $400, I think, if you're a student that wants there's a couple of features in commercial that don't exist in non-commercial, but I think at this point there's only two. That's another thing we did well at. We said at the beginning we had a couple of features in commercial that we trickled down into non-commercial, which I'm really pleased with. It was a promise we made at the beginning, and then we delivered on it. We did over every couple of years we'd add a new feature, we'd drop it down. In fact, for a while they were okay, we have to add a new feature in a commercial only because we run out of things to include. So when we added project support, we added that just to commercial. But yeah, and so for the vision, kind of where we're going and where we're at, I mean, the question now is how big do we want to be as a company? What is our 19 people? If we keep growing, we need to now kind of restructure, look at that, or do we try to keep at a flat size where we can stay this, or do we try to grow bigger, but do like a Valve sort of thing, right? Where they notoriously have like a very flat no org chart and yet a bigger group. What could that look like? So that's like our sort of next thing is trying to figure out where do we go? And then we've got all these ideas for, actually we are launching another new sort of product here pretty soon, just in, I don't think we've even, maybe publicly said this before, but
well, you're welcome to now if you want.
Yeah. It is. It's totally fine. I mean, we're very transparent about it, but we've definitely told a number of folks individually. We started selling a couple of architectures as separate architectures just in the last couple of releases, and that's different from us because from the very beginning we took like the Ghidra model of like every architecture you can write your own, you can add your own. Fully extensible, one price. We didn't do the like per architecture pricing that IDA has always done for the decompilation. And we had a couple of people like reach out and be like, "Hey, can you build me an architecture for nanomips? Like, I really want this." But it like just wasn't popular enough that like it was gonna justify itself by just a few extra $1,500 purchases, if that makes sense, right? So like we were like, well, like if we do it, we have to charge separately. This is the only way it made sense. And so the last 2 releases, and this will also be true in this release, we're releasing one extra architecture in the all the products, and then one architecture that's only a paid thing. One extra architecture, next release, same thing. So 2 new architectures. We're basically going to take all those paid architectures. We were kind of charging them like a la carte, and we're instead just going to have like Binary Ninja Ultimate. We're going to have like a new edition. It'll be $3,000 instead of $1,500, but it will include these more esoteric niche embedded Tricore, C-Sky, nanomips, and we're going to add some more as well in the future. So we are going to have like that kind of coming soon. So that's kind of another thing that's on the horizon.
So for the things that you're looking at in terms of like potential growth into the company, are you guys looking at the number of users that are using it and paying for it on the commercial side, or are you guys also looking at government contracts where you guys are bringing more money in through that? Which one or both of those avenues do you guys look at for KPIs?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we don't want to be too skewed, basically, right? Like to be clear too, we're fully transparent about this. We've got some like research contracts essentially that we're doing prototype development of capabilities. So we demoed, for example, Firmware Ninja a few months ago on like one of my live streams, which is a new plugin that just does a bunch of firmware specific things, like automatically find MMIO and I don't even remember we actually, one of the features that we built for that is now in the base product, which is the automatic base address detection. So open up a firmware blob and it just will try to scan, find pointers, predict base addresses, guess them, check the string references and function references. So it will just find me the base address, right? This is a very useful feature. So that was actually originally developed for a prototype on one of our research contracts. So, we don't do like vulnerability research or like, we're not like using the tooling. Yeah, exactly. It's more like we have done occasionally a couple of those contracts before. Actually, they tend to be commercial as well too. Every now and then we'll pick up one of those because it's nice to force ourselves just to use the tool to get things done occasionally and just kind of keep the skills fresh. So very occasionally, but we really don't. Usually, we actually often will turn down work like that. But like we've got a number of research contracts where we're building these prototypes, and then if it works well, like we still have the rights to be able to ship in the product or ship as a new plugin or a free plugin. So several of our architectures and plugins, that we've released open source were basically funded on these research contracts in the past. So we do have, about half the company doing researchy things on that, even though half the time those researchy things just are features or plugins or stuff that goes, it's all Binary Ninja focused. So as long as we keep getting these contracts that are like, the government's happy to pay us to build a prototype for a thing that we can then roll into the commercial product, we'll probably keep going. It's just funded R&D. But we don't want to exceed it too much. If 80% of our team is just doing that kind of stuff and 20% is doing product, that feels like an unhealthy split. So we really try to keep it kind of 50-50. That's really
a difficult balancing act through the last 10 years of doing so, right?
It's not been too bad because mostly we just say no to a lot of things. Like people will be like, oh, hey, there's this new contract. I want you to come help me do this thing. And we're like, well, if we don't have a good idea for a binge of feature or analysis or plugin that we would build to solve that problem, like it doesn't make sense for it. Like it gave us a lot of clarity for the type of work that we do and don't do. I think if you're just starting a general defense contractor, you're like, hey, whatever we can get, it's service. It's just a labor-based contract, and you get your markup on top of that. And because we had this kind of very specific vision, we just said no a fair amount to things like, no, we're full or we're good. Or even sometimes the work is good and we're like, but we don't have the people to do it. And I don't want to like lower the bar and I just hire anybody just to get it done. Like we very been intentional about our growth. And so sometimes that limits us as well. So it's kind of a case by case basis. It depends on the contracts. It depends on what comes up. It depends on how the sales are going. I would love to be able to just do the product, right, and let the contracts kind of go, because even at their best, they're still, you got to do monthly reports and invoicing. Like it's kind of nice to just have a product where it just sort of like is separate from like the development and the roadmap, and you can just, as long as people still kind of buy and renew, you just keep going, keep building and adding stuff. Whereas you don't have quite as much flexibility with the contracts, but it's worked so well, and everybody kind of wins. The government gets like a prototype that a lot of these like research contracts, it's like a one-off thing that doesn't go anywhere, never transitions, nothing ever happens to it. This is like mostly DARPA work too, to be clear. Like a lot of the work that we've done, it's nice that we are able to like have it be something that will be around for 5 or 10 years, right? Like they have a sense that anything built on Binary Ninja is going to last. It's not going to be like this one-off prototype, which happens unfortunately more times than you might like as a citizen, when the government pays for some research that like it's a defense contractor and they built a thing and then it disappears and nothing ever happens to it. Happens far too often.
And so when they purchase your guys' research and then of a prototype of something, and then you guys integrate into your tool, do they then purchase your tool afterwards?
So when it's DARPA, not necessarily, right? Because their whole job is to like cause it to happen, and then it's other people within the government that they want. Like their job is just to get the DoD or other people in the government to be using the research that they develop. They aren't direct consumers of it. I mean, they might use it like in some follow-on research contract or something, but generally, like DARPA wins if they get a bunch of other groups within the government using the things they've developed. If they transition it and it now is a follow-on contract in the Navy or the Air Force or whatever has like some other contract that they will sign to get you to like continue to do that thing, or just they're buying Binary Ninja, and then the thing that the research contract paid for is now available as a plugin. That's even better for them because it's cheaper than the government contract, right? So like that's what winning looks like for them to a large extent. If they're really improving the state, if they're solving problems that their community has and getting that stuff actively into the hands of other government people.
Got it. So what's next for Vector35, and what's going to be on the roadmap for the next? How deep do you guys look? Do you like 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
So I mean, on the one hand, we have had like Sidekick has been a 5-year thing. We knew 5 years ago we were going to have some AI based thing, and what was that going to look like, and how's it going to work, and let's just go plug away. Spend the first 3 years internally, and then you finally get some customers, get a prototype, and iterate on it. So sometimes we have stuff like that out there. We have right now on our roadmap. I feel like it's a little more near term than it's ever been, just because we're kind of like we've been burned through a lot of this stuff, and so now really it becomes a question of like we have a lot of ideas for business problems we could solve with our technology, and do we now pivot, or do we license, or do we work with other companies to like build wrap Binary Ninja inside of other products, or sell an enterprise security product that is Ninja powered in some way? And do we do that? Do we partner? Do we license? Like, what does that look like? So that's something that we're continually kind of tinkering with and talking to folks, and we've had several different kind of experiments and we built it from the beginning to do that. Like from the very beginning, Ninja is just a library that you can like easily wrap, and so that's really like IDA has 9.0 coming with, so it's going to have headless mode. Like that's been like 10 years ago. That was a part of the core design, right? And it's first class. It works great like that. We have one API. We don't have like a public-private API, and so it works well for exactly situations like that. So yeah, we might see some integrations and partnerships. I think there's a lot more to be done in terms of integrating AI. I think we are absolutely the most mature thing in this space. Like most of the other, like any other AI plugins, like, well, we decompiled it and we copied and pasted the decompilation into an LLM, and then we asked the question. Like, okay, that's cute, but that's not like really. That's just the very, very beginning. We have a lot more deep integrations already, but I think we're still barely scratching the surface. How can we integrate an LLM, for example, into changing two things that are equivalent into the one that's more readable, right? If I have an if statement, or if I have a switch statement, and I'm reordering the blocks and things, like you can do, there's a lot of things you can do to improve readability that are semantically equivalent. Like they're the same thing, but like one of them is just more intuitive or more readable. Little stuff like, is it less than or is it greater than or equal to 1, or is it greater than 0, right? Like, which one is more understandable? Well, it depends on the context of what the thing you're talking about is, and whether it's generic. I don't know. It depends. And so that's where I feel like that there's a lot of interesting things potentially that we can leverage machine learning and integrate it more deeply into the decompilation, like at different stages of analysis, which is also where our exposed ILs and like the stack of them that we have make us really well suited towards that. So I think that's going to be particularly interesting. But we were really worried about like export controls on decompiler technology, and then the NSA open sourced and put on GitHub Ghidra.
Yeah.
We're like, okay.
Well, we should be fine. Yeah.
Clearly, the government doesn't think that this is a export control technology if they're open sourcing it on GitHub. So that was actually that was kind of great. Yeah, in terms of AI, I don't think so. We'll see what happens with it. But
yeah, let me ask you a little bit more about the most difficult challenges you had in Vector35, like as an entrepreneur and shifting from very, very technical. I mean, you've been a technical lead as well, so you've been able to have different types of leadership as well. But there's like a mentality shift of like, okay, I'm the technical person. Now I got to put on my business hat and then the sales hat. And then how has that been in that transition? And what are some of the challenges that you've faced as the entrepreneur or the co-founder of your company?
Yeah, I think some of the hardest things for us were around pricing and marketing.
Pricing and marketing.
What does that look like? We have zero experience.
Competitors out there to be like, okay, we know them and them. That's like it, right?
Yeah, we've got Ghidra and X-Rays. That's exactly it. One's free, and the other one's been around for 30 years. Like, okay, what does this look like? So I think it's this is one where we can read books, but like I don't know how much their advice is really all that relevant a lot of the time. Right, and so that's been super challenging figuring out how we do our, there was certain bits of advice we got. We're like, that sounds good. Let's try that. Like, never discount. Like, there's a lot of different theories on discounting or whatever. And I think there's sort of two ways. Either you really bake in discounting and have a high initial price, and then you can, segment your market that way with discounts and sales, and you can get people, or just never ever discount at all, because that way people know that's just the price and that's just locked in. And we've kind of gone that route. But I don't think it's inherently right or wrong. We're like, yeah, that sounds good. And it also sounds easier because I don't like negotiating. I'm too hard. Like, I'll just give things away. So like, just lock it in. So I think pricing in particular, as we move to the higher ends of the market, move to our enterprise tier and some, much more expensive versions, like dealing with business sales practices, we're still figuring that out and still learning. You have to negotiate on, at the lower price point. I will say one of the lessons we learned that I wish we would have learned earlier is when I'm selling a $1,500 license, don't negotiate ever on anything. No. Like, we would have companies early on be like, well, we can't agree to your standard EULA. You need to sign our custom terms. And I would read them, or I would hire my like outside consultant contractor or my lawyer to like review the thing. And it's like, no, if you don't spend, so now we have a minimum and we keep raising it, right? It's up to like $15,000 now. If you're not spending $15,000, I will not review your terms. Take it or leave it. Because 9 times out of 10, they're going to take it. Like, they just want Binary Ninja. And they're going to get to a reseller or somebody else, or
go down for, right?
It's not even so much that they will go down. It's just that there's different parts of, like, it's the engineer just wants it, and then there's the purchasing department that just has all this stuff that they're required to do and required to try to make people agree to. And so they want you to agree to all this stuff. And so we just say like, nope, this is our policy. We will not fill out your paperwork below a certain dollar threshold. That was liberating. That was so huge because that freed up so much of our time that we were wasting. Like, it is, I remember in particular, there was one large financial, a very large, well-known financial bank that it also was very British. Really narrows it down.
Yeah.
But
there
was some good engineers and some people I really respected, like in the engineering, but I've never worked with a more dysfunctional purchasing system. Like, in the course of them buying the product, it's like 6 to 9 months, and it would turn out.
Is that normal? In general?
No. Very few. Right, and I mean, if you're selling $100,000 or several $100,000, sure, 6 to 9 months, okay, and you got the negotiation, whatever. They bought 2 licenses, so they paid like $3,000, right? To be clear, maybe at the time may even have been right.
All right,
you put your credit card and go swipe it and move on. Like, what are you guys doing? And this is where we first were like, this is insane. What are we doing? Because we literally have email threads of over 100 emails of like this back and forth. And what happened is the person that purchasing would quit. And a new person would come, and we'd have to reteach them everything we had already taught the old person because they can't read the email thread, apparently. And, like, it was the most painful they wanted us to agree to their they're human rights violations, ethics documents. Like you as a subcontractor, I'm like, I'm not a subcontractor. You're just licensing my software. Please just purchase it, move on. But they literally wanted like hundreds of pages of like documentation read and approved, and that was the last one where I was like, never again. No, I'm not even good. I will not even look at your paperwork below this threshold. And even above that, I'm much more willing to just be like, nope.
Have you calculated the amount of time and hours like it took for you guys to $6,000 deal?
Refused to, because it would be depressing. Yeah. We lost a lot of money, and it was like not even six. It was less, God. Right? So like, yeah, it was that was a really important lesson learned. It's at the beginning you feel like every sale super matters and you have to get everything, and that you do. But like also, and it helped for us to be cheaper too, right? Because we didn't come out of the gate with a 6-figure or 5-figure product at the beginning. We were 3 or 4 digits initially. That helped a lot too. It's the realization that like, wait, why would we bother to? No, we're just not going to do that. That was probably the most important lesson I think that we learned, and I wish we would have done it sooner, because it would have saved a lot of headache with that particular organization.
Yeah, a lot of people they'll gain market share by releasing a product for cheap or free. I think that's what PayPal did, and they
absolutely
the market went on eBay, and then by the time they integrated like 2%, 3% fee, then everyone had already been starting using it. They were like,
yeah, so that depends exactly on your pricing strategy, right? Like if you are going to start with just enterprise deals and sales where you're 5 or 6 from the beginning digits, sales, then you don't really have that flexibility. Like you're going to have to deal with the lawyers and the purchasing department contracts, and it's going to take 6 to 9 months, and that's just, depending on exactly where in that, like lower fives maybe not, depends on who you're selling to, but that's definitely something that we've had to learn.
What have been some of your like biggest contracts that you've gone through and worked on in terms of like selling in bulk for your guys' software?
I think we have a particular telecom company which kind of out of the blue reached out and got like 40 licenses a couple years ago, which was a pretty large one. We have nowadays it's larger, not so much in total seats of licenses, but it'll be like an enterprise customer with like 10 floating licenses, right? So they could have 50 people, they could have 10 people. I don't know exactly how big they are, but they're buying the enterprise with floating licenses, and so it's a much higher price point, it's a higher support tier.
Is the majority of the revenue on the product side commercial versus non-commercial?
So historically, I should pull that spreadsheet up. Let me see here. We do have an active license count that shows the splits between commercial versus non-commercial, and this is interesting too, especially when you look at like Ghidra's impact on the market too, right? Because our sort of like part of our game plan, part of our game plan initially was like, look, if we just get students and hobbyists and just wait, we'll take over. That was 100% our strategy, right, against IDA from the very beginning, and then that is where really Ghidra really hurt us the most, right? Now, there are absolutely professional and corporate environments that are still using it, and we're kind of competing with, because again, free is hard to compete with. But that was where we 1 year Seesaw as CTF for students, it was like Binja was like taking over, and I was so excited. The next year, it was like all Ghidra. And actually, the year after that, ironically, it was actually back to like IDA and Ghidra, but it's kind of more chaotic. It was sort of a mix, which is interesting as things change. But that's where it can really making sure that we're active. The student discount has helped a bunch, and so we have a surprising volume of student discounts. We've really thought about should students be free? Should we just give free student licenses? We've really wrestled with that.
Or incorporating it into like education systems or institutions where the teacher then utilizes it and teaches with it, so that way upon leaving, everyone's already using it.
Yeah, and like I said, early on that was our sort of strategy, but we didn't make it totally free. We still made it cost, because I just sort of I'm kind of a stickler on I want it to have some value, in particular if you're a student. If it's super discounted and you get a student discount, but you've paid your real money on it, you're going to put the time in to actually use it and evaluate it. And if it's just it's just totally free. More likely, you're much more likely to, because that money has real value to you for the most part. That was $75 you had to pay. That's a PS5 game, right? So I at least that's theoretically that's my logic on why we still charge. So we have about 1.5 times the commercial licenses in non-commercial licenses,
Okay,
right?
so you guys are heavy in non-commercial.
So we have more non-commercial, but again, by revenue, commercial is way more, right? Because commercial is 2x or no, more than that, way more than that. It is like 4x. In fact, it used to be 2x at one point, and we just randomly doubled the price of commercial, left non-commercial alone, and we're like, oh, let's see what happens. I do think there are a lot of commercial companies. We'll see a commercial email go by fast on a non-commercial license occasionally, and we'll shoot them a note and be like, just so you know, like, you're using it, like it might be fine because depending on the terms of like how you're using it, you can use it at work. And we have like specific terms that like describe like, okay, this is considered commercial, this is considered not commercial. We'll just kind of let people know. But yeah, and it looks like non-commercial continues to actually grow at a faster rate than commercial, which is interesting. So that's been even in the face of Ghidra, kind of flat for a while, and then it sort of picked up again post Ghidra.
Can you see like the point when like Ghidra was there, and then if you guys grew was pretty much the same or dipped?
Oh yeah, no, it was about 6 to 9 months of flat growth, like no growth whatsoever, right? So yeah, we went from like 10-20% like consistent growth.
What were you guys feeling and thinking at that time?
Well, that was the time in which we took on a very small outside investment for equity, just for like 5% of the company, just so we had more in the bank, because we were really worried about like, do we need? In hindsight, we didn't need to do that, so it wasn't certainly required, but we thought that maybe we would, and so we kept a little more kind of in the coffers.
Would you advise entrepreneurs to do that same move, or maybe adjust?
That's
different.
That's so hard to say, right? Like, our product was technically far enough along that we looked at Ghidra and we thought, okay, I think we can weather this. Like, if that had happened even a year or two earlier, we probably wouldn't have been able to. But we had, 6 years of development. The product was already mature enough. We had, enough things out there. We're like, okay, I think we have enough advantages over it. But it was very concerning for sure. We were definitely kind of keeping an eye out for it. I feel like every situation is different. Whether you should be pivoting, it depends on what, like, Ninja is our baby. It's our passion. It's why we could be making way more money, like, working for any of the major tech companies. Right. Like, everybody at my company is highly skilled. We're very good at development, reverse engineering, security. Like, we have skill sets that could actively double our salary maybe somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Like, no question. But like, we all really like what we're doing. And like who we're doing it with, like the problems we're getting to solve. And like as the product does better, we get bigger bonuses, right? So the goal of the dream has always been like, well, just get like more product sales without growing the size of the team, and then we can just continue to bump everybody's salary up, which is this year's looking really good for us. So it's been nice to see that kind of dream coming to fruition. So we're gonna keep doing it.
We've talked about the origins. We've talked about what's happening right now. We've also talked about the future. What's the future for you? What are you going to do in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I really it surprised me last year when it was like 8.5 years, and I was like, oh wait a minute, didn't I leave my last 2 jobs after 7 years? And I'm like, was
that like a wake up, or like, am I going to do it again kind of thing?
It was just I took stock, right? I stepped back and was like, okay, is this what I want to keep doing? And the answer was absolutely. Like, I want to keep doing this. Like, I'm not, I don't feel like we've solved the problem. Like, IDA is still the major dominant tool. Technically there's still problems that I want to solve. I think where the product itself is at a spot where it can now replace IDA for the vast majority of users, and so now we just got to go like show everybody, like convince them and like demonstrate it and be like, hey, listen, you get all these advantages. Let's get everybody switched. And so that's super exciting. Like, I feel like we've done some of the hardest work, and now we can reap the rewards. But I also don't feel bored. Like, I feel like we're launching a conference just next year.
So tell us more about the conference. Where's it going to be? What's it going to be about? Speakers, CFPs, everything.
Yeah, Reverse, re-verse.io is the conference name. We just yesterday put the website live, and the CFP is open starting immediately. You can go submit your talks. Please submit talks. It's going to be in Orlando, Florida, February 28th to March 1st is the conference. Okay. In hindsight, we really hate that it splits. It's really annoying to have to split 2 months for the date, but it was the right weekend for the hotel. So. It's a little bit like Infiltrate, really. We just took a lot of inspiration from like how Infiltrate was run.
How was it run?
There was an event. In fact, we hired the event coordinator, Melinda, who ran Infiltrate. They had
Oh,
an outside
perfect.
event. So yeah, we very much were like, oh, hey, Linda, you want to go do this? And she was excited because she loved Infiltrate, the community, the people involved. So it's gonna be more reverse engineering focused. Infiltrate was very offensive security focused, so exploits, vulnerability research. Ours will have some of that, but it will have also malware analysis and hardware reverse engineering will be a little bit more just reverse engineering. It's not BingeCon. So to be clear, like, several of our trainers are using Ghidra, Talks can use Ghidra at Binge. Like that's totally fine. We're not just trying to shill binary ninja here. We want legitimately the best, the research and presentations. But the thing that Infiltrate did two things really well. One, like the hotel, the food, everything was top notch. It was really well done. We're gonna have really good like logistics and planning. And you didn't. So Infiltrate was in South Beach. You didn't leave the hotel because everybody stayed there. There was meals there. There was like big gatherings out in the open lawn, which is beautiful in Florida in February. Right, it's like a nice time of year to be outside. And so it was really a good time for like just connecting with other people that were at the conference. Like it was very like close knit, and that sort of vibe I think is really, really important. And then the second thing that Infiltrate did super well, which I thought was great, is not a lot of conferences force dry runs beforehand of the presenters. Every accepted speaker has to do a dry run a month before the talk, the actual conference, and then the review board or the conference organizers get to basically give feedback. They're like, oh, you should do this, or what about this question? What about this? Or this slide is hard to read, or like just all that stuff. And so just that little, I mean, just having me being forced to have your slides done in advance is
Oh,
alone,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Because like you're
Yeah.
always making changes, but if you have an internal deadline that's earlier than the conference, because if I do this all the time. If I have a deadline, I will right up until that deadline be working on it. But by forcing people to do it earlier, you just get so much higher quality presentations. And so that's another thing that we're bringing back as well. Is I really there's just a ton of value. And even as somebody who presents a ton, like I'm a very good presenter. I can off the cuff, I can just do something quickly and live. I can put together the week before, and it'll be a good presentation. It's still important to have had that earlier deadline to go through and dry run it once. And so like I'm not going to name names. I remember somebody like, do you know who I am? I get presentations all the time back during the Infiltrate days. Basically,
Okay.
was
Yeah.
saying this for that process, and sorry, like this is to your benefit as well as the audience's. Everybody wins when you have to do this. So yeah,
You said that you want to keep it very community and tight knit. Is there like a certain number of tickets that you're going to sell? We've been
yeah,
at Offensive Con, and there's
yeah,
only a certain amount of tickets always sold out.
yeah.
So
Offensive sells out real fast. Offensive I think does about 600, so they're a little bit bigger for our first year. We're sticking at even 400, so even a little bit smaller than that. And so I'd rather sell out and really have it be tight. We might. If there's a ton of interest that sells out, we'll see. We could go a little bit. The space we're in could actually grow much bigger, but like, partly because it was our first year, and partly just because again, yeah, like I don't want it to be some huge DEF CON like experience. Like DEF CON's fun for other reasons, but it's not a community, right? It's hundreds of communities that are all kind of like co-located.
that's probably a better way to put it. I would say that DEF CON is a community just because of the comparison to Black Hat. Like I don't
Sure,
know how Black
that's
Hat
fair.
feels about community at all, but DEF CON
Yeah,
it does feel. But you're 100% right that the micro communities are now the size of what DEF CON used to be
exactly. All the
in
villages and
itself, right?
oh yeah, no, every village there is as big or bigger than like DEF
It's
CON
its
when I
own
first
conference
attended.
at that point.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
they have their own
definitely.
agendas and track and speakers and awards and like they're 100%. It's dozens of separate cons kind of in one. So
Yes.
um, yeah, but this is meant to be kind of small. It's meant to be sort of more boutique, really really nice high end. It's also Florida in the summer, which is a great time to visit. It's right near Disney and
In the
uh,
summer, you said
actually not
February
summer, not summer, not
28th?
summer. No, Florida in the summer is when the worst time to visit because it's too hot.
Okay.
Yes, Florida in the winter when it's a great time to get out of cold climates and come visit Florida.
Got it.
So
Track, one track, two tracks,
one
fire
track,
strike.
yeah, one track for now. I remain really skeptical of two tracks. I love again part of that community, knowing everybody
Yeah.
is there for the same talk and the same
Same
thing.
talk. Yeah.
Maybe we could do some fireside, some workshops, some other thing eventually. But I think for first year in particular, we're going to keep it simple. I like one track, and if there's a topic you're not interested in, well, you can go outside, and that's a good time to talk to people. And but just knowing that everybody is sort of there for the same stuff, I think is valuable. So that's part of the appeal. What
Definitely.
little other stuff that like a viewing room outside, right, where you can also listen to the talk, not in the main conference area. We want to talk to people, but you still want to hear the talk that's going on, or occasionally tune in. Offensive
Mhm.
con does that great. I think that's another thing that we love. So there's a lot of little stuff we've been thinking about. We've been talking about doing this for since we started the company. It's really been something we've been toying with.
This is a big move for you guys. It's a very exciting thing to be
Finally
doing.
feels like it's time. Yeah, we're ready to do it. So hopefully and it's just there's been a lot of conferences in the US have shut down. ShmooCon last year is coming up.
Yeah, what
Infiltrate.
is that?
Oh, they're just burnt out. I think they've been running that thing for so long, right?
Okay.
Yeah. No, and actually, I ran the CTF there for like 6 years back in the day with Heidi and Bruce. They're fantastic to work with, but it is just a huge investment of energy and time, and their run is is a nonprofit too, and so it's like their labor costs are covered, but like every year they sort of start fresh, kind of with the budget and with it's just a ton of work. They've done it. It's been a very good benefit. So there's DistrictCon too. I want to shout out. There's another conference starting up actually just the week before ours in DC, which they're kind of trying to inherit the ShmooCon mantle. We kind of want to inherit the Infiltrate mantle. So that's kind of the thing there. But I think both are needed. I think there's a lot of value in more cons in the U.S. because Hexacon, OffensiveCon, Recon, a lot of the best conferences right now are not in the U.S. So I'd love to
at least offensively
kind of return that.
Reverse engineering.
Yeah. Even just the kind of technical detail depth. Like there's B-sides, and in the U.S. you just don't see as many conferences. I feel like.
You have a massive amount of B-sides. Sometimes you get good technical talks.
You do, but as I'm saying, you don't have I just feel like if you look at top InfoSec conferences, Black Hat and DEF CON are really some of the only ones you see in the U.S. It's just not. Can you think? What can you think of? Can you think of a good, really? I mean, a SummerCon is more of a drinking con. It's fantastic and fun, but it's not. It's explicitly not the highest technical content talks.
It's now that we're actually talking about conferences and talks and other places to go drink at, it's really divided between, because I've given talks nationally and internationally at conferences, but then also at camps. So
yes,
and it also depends on the audience that you're looking for, right? So if you're talking, and I think it's split between commercial based things, government based things, and then more grassroots.
Community, exactly. Hacker, the old school. Right? Yeah, what DEF CON was a long time ago and hasn't been for years. The fact that there's sponsors being tweeted out. I literally tweeted those recently. How weird it is that DEF CON villages tweet out sponsor lists, and this is bizarre to me. When corporate logos were anathema for the longest time at DEF CON. It really was a counterculture thing, and it clearly hasn't been for it's changed so much. And again, I don't make it as a judgment. I don't think it's inherently better or worse, just very different than it used to be.
Are you guys having sponsors at your guys' conference?
We do. In fact, we already have 4 that it's crazy to me. We actually 4 signed up before we even launched the website. People who are yes, perfect. We're excited for a conference. So we've got Binarly as our platinum sponsor, Cellbrite, Ursa Secure, and our II Research Innovations is the other one. So
perfect.
Yeah. Give them their plug now. But it's cool that people were willing to sponsor us sort of sight unseen, right? Just trusting that we would do it. So that felt really good.
It's building the brand. That's the 10 years of building you guys' brand up and being a in the industry.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
The only other hobby I do is speed cubing, and I haven't been practicing as much lately. So
speed cubing? Are you doing competitions for speed cubing?
There's not enough in Florida, but I go to most of the ones in Florida. But the last one was in Tallahassee. It was just too far of a drive, so I didn't go.
Are you state champion yet?
Not even. No, I'm an old man. Are you kidding me? There's literally a separate league for people over 40. There's actually a separate scoreboard because I at one point was 69th in the world over 40, but I'm 30,000th or something if you count everybody. I am very slow. Yeah, relative to my fastest times are 12, 13 seconds usually. And that's not even enough.
Kids doing 6 seconds, 5 and 4 now?
They're down in the 4s. Yeah, they're down in the 4s for the top spots. But any regional one.
It's just there's no algorithm advantage. Everyone knows the algorithm of the fastest way to do it, right? Or
for the most part, yeah. What there are, you can memorize more and more algorithms, and the more you memorize, the more options you sort of have available to you, but also at first the more it takes to recognize which algorithm you should do can actually slow you down. So there's that trade-off. The best people know all the algorithms and also have zero pauses and just go straight from one to the other. There is a little bit of creativity in one of the earlier sections. It's kind of fun in terms of decision-making choices. Like there's absolutely strategy. It's not just a hard and fast, this is the optimal way always and you know it. There is a lot of like different techniques and different people will solve it a little bit in the earlier phases. Towards the end, it tends to look very, very similar, with the exceptions for like how many algorithms you have memorized. But call them algorithms, just like sequences of moves for particular cases, like case solves. But no, it's fun. It's been my pandemic hobby. It's been a good thing to pick up, and
it's one of those things that like I've wanted to do. I remember one of my best friends in high school. He knew it how to do. He solved it, and I was like, I want to learn. But I want to learn on my own. I don't want to follow an algorithm. And then now I'm 30, I don't know. And I haven't done it. And I'm like, shit. Maybe I should just learn the algorithm.
Should have just learned it. Rusty, my third co-founder, did that where he was like, I want to learn like intuitively. I want to get a sense for. I just want to play with it for a month or so. So he did that. Like I was just straight up like, I was just going to memorize. He didn't solve it though. That's the thing is he made it to the last layer. And it gets exponentially more difficult.
Really?
Because the closer you get to being solved, the less freedom you have to like make moves without disrupting what you've already solved. And so that's where it becomes easier to like just memorize an algorithm or look up the correct answer to like get those last little bits. But like the first two, anybody can and should just play with it for a couple weeks, and you can learn enough to get the first two layers, like to get the whole bottom face and to get like the size and the edge. Like you can figure out just by
I got that part.
Doing that. Yeah, exactly. Then the last layer, it's obviously there's people that figured it out on their own. It's been solved before by people at that point, but I'm not one of them. And that's, so I just memorized a lot of good algorithms.
About games. So like, do you get any interest in playing like games like Mafia or Werewolf where you have to like pretend to be someone? Like,
yeah, my son is he's literally right now is playing that out of school. Every day at lunch break they play Werewolf. Yeah, we have all of the variants at home. There's a new one, by the way, if you haven't looked at the Kickstarter called either Werewolf in the Dark or Mafia in the Dark. I think that looks really, really fun. It's like an in-person kind of big group gameplay. But anyway, yeah, so I'm very familiar with those games.
Do you play these ones as well? Do you like these ones?
I do to a certain point. I'm a pretty good liar, like when I need to be, which is weird because I'm not naturally a liar. Like I just am super. I default to the truth just all the time, which is also part of what maybe what
because it's like long-term relationships. Anything else,
it's never worth it.
It's almost not. Yeah, it's like yes, exactly. So
if somebody like asks me my opinion, I'm gonna tell you my opinion, even if you don't like it, because I'd rather the truth now than it's one of those things where just practically speaking, I think it's always best to tell the truth, always. And so I'm scrupulously truthful, and even just how we run the company, we're very transparent. We have a GitHub database with all of our issues and our roadmap and future. Like we don't hide or have secret plans. Like we do everything in the open as much as we can. It's just kind of like our philosophy on doing this. I really think that's just a better way to do things. But I'm usually pretty good at Mafia, like in lying about like what I bet. I can keep a pretty good face.
I prefer. I like it a lot too. I've noticed we've been playing. I got like Catan right here. I taught my girl Catan, and she loves it. She loves playing it. And what I've realized is if like let's say I go to your house and I'm playing with you, right? I'm more likely to screw you over because I know you, and I don't really want to screw anybody else over because I don't know them.
Yeah.
So the person that you invite over always screws you over. Not always, but most of the time will you over more so. So you have this like disadvantage. Like as soon as the game starts, I've noticed. And I was like, it's just one of these like quirky things about like how the game dynamics set up and like how human behavior is, regardless of the rules in the games.
It's interesting too. Some people, like my mother, despises Mafia or Werewolf or any of those games. She just because she always gets Mafia and she hates it. She just doesn't like lying. She doesn't like being the one that's got to hide what she is. It is the most painful. She literally just for her mental health. Sweet. We just stopped her. Yeah, exactly. She's just too nice, and like it just doesn't. So she just refuses to play now. So now we'll like big family gatherings. We'll always play a round of Mafia, and she's excluded.
Grandma doesn't play.
Nope, grandma doesn't play. Everyone's just that's fine. Grandma doesn't play, but all the cousins, all my siblings, my dad, we'll all do it. So yeah, that's fun.
We'll play games. We always play family games as well, and whether I'm playing actually, it's when I play games with new people. If it's a game that like almost 100% sure, very, very confident that I'll win. Sometimes I'll like decide if like I'll just purposely lose, so that way the next time in series that we play,
they want to play.
Yeah, they want to play. It's just another level of.
I like co-op ones. Table co-op, like there's a Castle Panic, and there's a couple of the tabletop games that are explicitly like cooperative. I think that's a really fun genre. There's a bunch of those which I really enjoy. I'd
like to see some of those and learn about those. We've never done those.
By nature, I'm too competitive. I combat that by just not caring and not be competitive at all. Because like once I start being a little competitive, it's bad. Like so, I sort of like have had to like over the years I've mellowed out and I don't try because once I like it's like I'm either on or off and like I just better
does
for
it carry
everyone's...
on after the game's done and you're like. You're like 10 years ago. This guy.
No, from me, no. I'm very. I can disconnect, but then other people, no, because I was the person that ruined it. So like, there are consequences afterwards, even if they're not direct. Right.
I've had this too. I played a game or whatever, and then like I don't trust Chris because
ever again
he did something in this game. I was like, we played a game. Like,
yeah. So that's the consequence. You gotta watch out for that.
Yeah, you gotta look out for that. But, all right. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm hoping a lot of people also gained a lot of insight from this. I think what the plan is, what I'll do is we're going to get a few episodes created. Then we'll start rolling them out, so that way I can like push one out like a week or something like that. But
schedule them out.
I'll keep you in the loop and
Sounds
everything like that. So, dude, Jordan, thank you so much for your time, man. Really appreciate you being on here. We're excited to see what more comes from Vector35, yourself as well, and then your conference coming up. So.
I appreciate it. Hopefully we'll see you there. Thanks. Take care.
Of course.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, brother.